Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and on this Wednesday afternoon, I'm joined by Patrick McGilp and John Yogi Hughes. This is the prelude, John, to a big night on Friday night. You're looking forward to it, mate, over in Belfast?
I'm looking forward to it, and my main concern at the moment is I've got a family barbecue on the Saturday, and I don't want to be dying a death while I'm at it. So it's how to behave myself is the issue, as always.
There will be a moment of the Friday evening, John, where you throw caution to the wind. You don't think about the barbecue, and you just go, I was going to say studs up, balls deep, whatever you want to call it, on Friday night. There we go. Yes, if you don't already know. Barry Lavery, the man, the legend, here we go, is impatiently waiting for Big Yogi to buy a drink on Friday.
He can keep on waiting.
He contacted us a while back and said, you know what, it'd be great if you guys could come over and do a gig over here. Paddy sorted out the venue, and we've been organising this for a while. It sold out very quickly, so well done to Paddy and all your mates who have been pushing that over in Ardoyne, and we cannot wait to come over to chat to Chris Sutton on Friday night. Have a wee think in the chat. If you could ask Chris Sutton one question, not involving Chris Boyd, what would that question be? Because every single time we do a gig with Chris Sutton, at the end of the night, the questions get thrown out to the audience. They write them down on wee bits of paper, John, and the vast majority of them are about Chris Boyd. So no more questions about Chris Boyd.
Funny enough, I mean, I've not been to a gig, so I didn't know, well, apart from that one, the one that you hosted, which wasn't yours, but I didn't know he'd do that. But I was actually thinking what question I would ask him. So I do have one for him.
You do? Fantastic. Brilliant. You're going to let the cat out of the bag, or shall we wait?
Oh, well, I was just going to ask him, you know, through his career, and if this is two separate things, give me two separate answers. Through his entire career and his Celtic career, what is the one memory that resurfaces with him every week, every couple of days? What's the one thing he thinks about? Good, bad, or indifferent, but it keeps coming back to him. You know, without being prompted, without someone saying, what do you think about this? What is that one thing that he thinks about? And from his entire career and from his Celtic career.
I like that, John, because it could be a what-if moment, or it could just be a moment of absolute elation, couldn't it? So that's a really good question. Patrick, have a think about it. Everybody in the comments, let us know what you would ask Chris Sutton. Do my job for me and set up all my questions for the first half of the evening. Thank you very much. We are running today, basically looking, Patrick, at behaving like a Champions League club. That's what it's all about. And we're talking about, you know, approaching the recruitment window as a Champions League club, looking at the stadium from that perspective and through that lens as well, Patrick. And we're not being silly here. We're not saying, you know, we expect to spend £200 million in a transfer window. That's not what we're saying. But let's do things based it on Champions League aspirations rather than just domestic aspirations. Is that something that you think we have in us? Are we capable of doing that as a football club, Patrick?
I like to think so. There's definitely been signs over the years. You know, the last 4 years, I think we've been on the up. We've been on the ascendancy. We've been better and better in European competition. We've achieved more. We've obviously increased our revenue year on year the last 4 years. So I like to think that we're on the up and we're still making some good decisions. But there is obviously a lot that you can improve on, and it is the stadium and it is the recruitment. You know, I think this is the sort of summer of reckoning for Paul Tisdale. He's been in the job sort of 6, 7 months. He's had a chance to see how we operate, how Brendan operates, the structures that are in place. And I like to think he's now got a grip on things. It looks as if we're getting our business done relatively early. We've got Kieran Tierney in, that was secured in January. It looks as if we're going to get this young boy from Fulham, Callum Osmond. So that's hopefully a good bit of business. And it looks as if the midfielder's at Nygren, the Swedish midfielder. He's going to come in soon. I think I seen Friday night that terms were agreed, so hopefully that will get done quickly as well. So I think that's been a real bugbear in the last few years, where we have got the business done, but it's taken us almost to the end of the window. Whereas now it's different. We've got a playoff to play. We need to get players in a lot earlier. And of course, I mean, the start of the season, you get so many important games, so the earlier the better. So I think we need to get our house in order that way. In terms of the stadium, I mean, it's a real bugbear of mine and probably a lot of others. Every Champions League night, you've got a big white tent sitting in front of the stadium because our press rooms or our rooms within the main
It's like
stand
a
are big enough.
crime scene. It's like a crime scene, Patrick, going up
Aye,
that
aye.
Celtic way.
And it is a crime that a club of our size and stature should be forced into doing something like that. Making guys like, not that we should be rolling out the red carpet, that they are the opponent, but making guys like Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp or whoever visits Celtic Park walking out into a big tent in the freezing cold in November to answer press questions. So I've long said I think the main stand needs redevelopment. There's no signs of it on the horizon, no sort of major development on the horizon. We found out the last few weeks that the 15 sort of premium boxes at the back of the main stand are being sort of done up for the first time in a few decades. So, I mean, it is positive that they're looking at improving the stadium for, paying customers. But at the same time, if they're going to invest, five-figure, six-figure sums, possibly even seven-figure sums into boxes that are there just now, it doesn't speak to me like they're looking at like knocking it down and building a totally new stand with improved facilities, more seats, more season tickets. Um, so it's a good thing and a bad thing. I was pleased and sort of gutted at the same time when I first heard that. Um, but there's a lot of improvements that can be made. A lot of fans who sit there and pay top dollar to sit in that main stand. They've got a lot of complaints about how narrow it is. I think the sort of canteen kiosk is right next to the toilets in some places, and it's just a bit of a mess at times. Folk getting shifted for European games because you put certain away fans in a certain corner. So I think there's a lot of improvements that could be made. But I think in the short term, certainly recruitment is what we're all looking at. We would have brought in, it will come out in September, but I imagine we've probably brought in more money in the last 12 months than we've ever done in our history with that new Champions League format. We obviously sold O'Reilly in that sort of 12-month financial window. So there's no reason not to spend the money. And, as we've been discussing basically since Aberdeen and possibly since Bayern Munich in February, we need to freshen up this squad. We need improvements. You're possibly looking at 2 or 3 starters going out the door. All sorts of rumours I'm sure we'll talk about, but you need a lot of bodies coming in, possibly 4 or 5 in my opinion, in the wings and the defence, possibly replacing a midfield player. So there is a lot of work to do, and hopefully Michael Nicholson, Paul Tisdale, and Brendan Rodgers can do it quick and do it well, because to be fair to them, they have had a lot of time to prepare, and now's the time when all 3 of them earn their money.
No, you're right, because obviously there's a lot of moving parts, John. I'll just reiterate my point yesterday in the Wells of Fife. Not quite sure what they're up to, but if I disappear for any reason, Patrick and John will just chew the fat until I come back. And I trust that you will do it. And it'll probably be far better and more entertaining than what it would be if I was here. But John, some great points from Patrick. We are going to be talking about the recruitment, the approach to the stadium, and everything else that this entails. And then obviously we can look at, we can probably link this into what we were talking about in relation to Paul Tisdale. Sorry, were you at that presentation, Patrick? I'm not sure. Were you at the fans forum that night when Tisdale gave his presentation?
No, Declan was, and Declan sort of fed the info back to me, so I wasn't there in person, but he apparently did give a sort of good 20-30 minute presentation. He appeared quite impressive. And he was saying, I think the announcement was in October, but Paul Tisdale said he started in January. So it appears impressive, but obviously the proof is in the pudding, and that will come this summer. If he does a bad job in the summer, like we did 2 summers ago, he'll be all talk. But I'm willing to give him a chance. I'm willing to sort of give him the time to prove himself.
Yeah, because there's been so much focus, John, on the image and the style of this individual, the football doctor, self-styled and all this stuff. But the proof is in the pudding. And I think that it's safe to say this is really the first transfer window that we can judge him on, because as Patrick says, only coming in the January, he can't hang his hat on that transfer window, but he can certainly do it to this one. And we're still feeling the effects of that really poor window. which obviously was the introduction back to Celtic when Brendan Rodgers came to the football club. So it is really important that we get it right this time round. How are you feeling about the kind of murmurs and the signs that are there? We've mentioned Osman Tierney's in the building, another player, Inamura, coming over from Japan potentially, and of course we look to have got the signing over the line of our new Swedish winger, albeit he can also play, apparently he can also play centrally as well, so that's quite an exciting move for us as well. So it looks as though we are getting a lot of business done nice and early, John, but what's your thoughts on the Paul Tisdale recruitment master plan?
Well, I mean, I think I said last week, we must see his workings. We must see what he's adding to it this summer, because I suspect we're going to have a huge job in our hands here between the areas that we need to strengthen and the potential for guys leaving. Bringing in 4 or 5 guys would be on the basis that nobody's going anywhere. So if we lose a couple, then we need a lot more than that. So and especially in light of FSR, we cannot be sitting with a bloated squad. So we've got to get these guys out the door. And I've not heard really anything apart from a rumour about Narowski going on loan back to Poland. And then when people are saying, "Oh, why is he going on loan?" It's because we just need him off the books. Mm-hmm. If we can't get him sold, we need him off the books for FSR. That's going to be a massive issue. We can't have these, your list of 10 guys there. They need to all be out of the club. They need to be on loan. They need to be somewhere else. We can't be footing the bill for them. That's a massive issue. So the guys going out is going to be just as important as guys coming in. And the reason why that's important, apart from the FSR issues, is because we need that money. Because our board aren't going to be throwing big money around, under normal circumstances, unless they know they're going to be saving it somewhere else. So, that has to be taken into account. Tisdale doesn't have a track record with us really at this point. So we need to see what's happening. In terms of the 3 that we're linked with, only one of them looks to be a serious contender for a starting spot. And that would be Ben Nygren. That's good. But the concern is, if that's the guy coming in, does that mean there's someone else going out, or is he coming in to bolster the numbers? In terms of Osmond, I reckon he's in to give Kenny a run for his money for 3rd place. I don't see it. I'd be very surprised if he was considered anything above that. Johnny Kenny's played for us 4 times. Osmond hasn't played a senior game, so the idea that he's going to, he looks good in what I've seen, but that's like us looking at tape of guys playing for the academy or tape of guys playing for the B team. The guys can look absolutely sensational because it's a level of who you're against. So I really don't know anything about him other than what I've seen, and the fact that his potential seems to be good. He's quick, he's strong, he's decent size, seems to be a good finisher. But you could probably have said all those things about John Kenny. So I reckon that's why he's coming in there. Nygren, obviously, we need someone in that position. Hatate is our only source outlet for creativity, and if we lose Kuhn, we need someone on the wing. So, he could fill a number of slots there, and it's that adaptability and flexibility that Brendan loves so much, which makes it easier to build a squad, rather than just slotting guys into one position. The Inamura one, I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. The only thing, I was saying to one of my friends the other day, the only thing I can think is maybe he's, backup left back, but he's never played left back. In his senior career, he's only ever played centre back. And to me, he just looks, his stats and everything, he just looks like Kobayashi. It just looks exactly the same as Kobayashi. Perhaps even advanced.
A cold chill down my spine there at the mere mention of Kobayashi, John. Remember him, dearie me.
But I remember looking at Kobayashi's YouTube highlights before he joined, and it was very, very similar. You know, that it's not as physical, and I mean, he just couldn't hack it, and I don't see any reason why this boy would be any different. And his overall stats are, I mean, he's not as good as Scales, he's not as good as Trusty. So what's he for? And does this mean that we're definitely, in light of FSR, the only thing I'm thinking is the board's decision is that our third and fourth choice players have to be cheap, you know, and you're just hoping you don't get serious injuries. So certainly fourth choice, is he coming in as a fourth choice centre half? Because maybe then that would make sense. Is he coming in as backup to Kieran at left back? That doesn't make sense to me. He doesn't have any experience doing that. That would be like, you know, us promoting someone up from the academy, and you know, we have guys in the academy we could promote up. So I don't know what that's about, that signing. I'll be perfectly honest. It's sort of baffled me. We have, you know, you're not seriously telling me that the consideration is that this kid's better than Narovsky, for instance. So, you know, we know the manager doesn't fancy him, but I would still be better than this kid as it stands. Now, he's obviously got potential, and it's an investment in potential maybe, but yeah, I mean, I don't see him troubling the first team for a good while. And, you know, as I say, the boy Osmond, we'll see what happens. But yeah, so out of the three of them, there's really only one of interest to me straight away, because what you're looking for when you're making signings is, isn't it? You don't want to be sitting there debating whether they have enough potential to actually get into the team. What you want to be discussing is how far they can push the team on.
Yeah.
You know, that they can come into the first team and push the team on. So it should be an automatic, yes, they're in the first team. And, you know, what impact are they going to have in the first team? You know, this, you know, we don't like to call them project players, but if that's the discussion we're having about them, then they are project players. You know, because if there's not enough evidence to establish whether they can even make the team, then they're a project player. So, you know, it's for me, it's as simple as that.
John, I think it's a great point. We touched on it yesterday when it came to Inamura, because I was asking the question, we're bringing him in, where does he place in the ranking, if you like? If he's a left-sided centre-back, Patrick, and our first choice is Liam Scales, and we spoke about this yesterday, and at the moment, your second choice is Trusty, because that's how we ended the season. We're seeing Inamura, because if you're bringing him in as a third choice, I totally get what John's saying there. It does look like a project signing. And you think to yourself, do we really need to be running with three left-sided centre-backs and three right-sided centre-backs? Mike Nawrocki hasn't played a great deal of football, but we have invested 2 years in Mike Nawrocki. And you think to yourself, well, surely he's going to be more at a more advanced kind of stage of his career than Inamura coming in from Japanese football. And we know that based on the 6 players that were brought in recently, that it's a 50% hit rate when it comes to importing players over from the J-League. So I am a wee bit concerned about that one if it comes to fruition. Patrick, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, there's so many ways to look at this. I mean, as you say, our hit rate since we signed the main 3 from the J League, it's been pretty bad. You know, Idaguchi was unlucky with injuries. Just in terms of coming from Asia as well. You know, you've got Kobayashi, you've got Yang, you've got Kwon, you've got all these guys who, apart from the main 3 of Kyogo, Maeda and Atati, they haven't really worked, and they've certainly not worked since Ange left the club. It's as if Ange knew a couple of guys by name, knew that they were complete quality. We've then had our own scouts go over there, and then everyone since that has been pretty poor. So, you know, I'd like us to still look into that market and try and get a few gems from that market, because I think it's definitely possible. Again, just coming back to recruitment, I just don't think I've got enough trust in the club and the structures that we can identify these sort of hidden gems. Yeah, I mean, we're stockpiling centre halves at a time when Rodgers, I think he wants his squad under 25 or under 22. I think it's under 25, isn't it?
25 was the figure.
Players.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of moving parts at centre half. I'm just assuming, and I think everyone else is assuming, that Lagerbielke and Navrosky aren't going to be here after the summer because they're not going to play. So there's no point in them being here. Welsh as well spent the last 6 months on loan. I struggle to see him getting back in the team. I mean, he's sort of fifth or sixth choice at the moment. Scales, decent backup. He's came in and he's done well for 2 years at times, but for me, he's not a starting centre half at Celtic. And then Trusty, he brings in Trusty for 6 million, but doesn't trust him to play in a cup final, even when Scales is having a poor game. And then, recently in the last few days, you've heard some rumours about Carter-Vickers wanting to move to the Premier League for 25 to 30 million. So there's a hell of a lot of moving parts. But I think John's right. Why are we looking to sign a fourth choice player? I mean, if I was Dane Murray, I'd be putting a transfer request in tomorrow. We've spoken at certain times about the pathway, and I know we've spoken at length about Cummings, who I think is going to leave this summer. The last sort of 9 months, he's been scoring for fun, and I think he only got 11 minutes against Aston Villa or something like that.
Yeah.
So we talk about a pathway, and I've defended the club. When Liverpool come in for a 16-year-old Ben Doak and are offering to pay him 20 grand a week, there's not a lot Celtic can do there. But when you've got a guy like Dane Murray, who Ange trusted to a certain extent to play him at the beginning of his spell, Rodgers decided to bring him on against Villa and then never play him again. He's tall. He's an all right defender for considering how young he is. And yet we must have 5 or 6 centre halves on the books. We're trying to sign another one. So it doesn't look good for any sort of player. I mean, he's 21, 22 in a couple of days. Any sort of centre half in that youth system must be totally scunnered. I mean, they've got no pathway to the first team at all, by the looks of things. So there's a lot of different moving parts, but I mean, what's for certain is, we need at least one centre half who's good enough to start next to Carter-Vickers. And if Carter-Vickers leaves, we need two players who are at Carter-Vickers' level. So we do have a real problem, particularly in the centre half department, and in my opinion, the winger department. Again, so many moving parts. You've got Yang, who, in my view, is not good enough at all. Forrest, who is, I think he's 34 in a few weeks' time. He's got 1 year left in his deal. You'd imagine that'll be him. Jota, who we know is quality, but he's possibly injured until, November till January, I think was the timeline of him coming back. So you're going at least half a season without him, and the most important half, a lot of people would say. And then obviously you need to decide whether Maeda is a winger, and Kuhn needs to decide if he wants to be here next season. So in those two areas in particular, I think we've got a lot of moving parts. You still get the backup at left back issue. You've possibly got an issue with Hatate maybe going. Engels, there was big money for him a few weeks ago, allegedly. So there are so many moving parts, which is why I'm hesitant to call it a rebuild, but it does feel like a rebuild this summer. I know it's like sort of the third rebuild in a row, and you can't really do that in football, but just with the amount of possible moves and the amount of sort of dead wood, or players who aren't good enough, I'd like to call it a refresh, but it's certainly a big refresh. And we do, as John said, we do need to go out and spend some money, because we get 2 or 3 holes there that need plugged by quality, and then you need to replace anyone who leaves as well. So I've been told to stop saying moving parts, so I'll stop talking. We've got a lot of work to do.
Who's told you to stop saying it? Is that coming through the comments? There we go.
Listen, Henrik McLaughlin, I'm obviously annoying him.
Well, the one thing I would say just in the comments, Liam Devine there in the comments is basically, really saying that Inamura is definitely a left back. It's ridiculous to say he's not a left back. Apart from the fact he's not a left back. Do you know what I mean? He profiles as a left back. Lots of people profile as different things. We've had people before that profile as a number 10, but played on the wing because we needed a winger, not a number 10. We don't play with a number 10. So it's all right to say he profiles as a left back. He has not played as a left back. So we're bringing a guy in who's not played in that position and just said, well, listen, son, do your best. There's no way he can be second choice to Tierney. I just cannot see how that's the case.
No.
It's not at all. And, it's, he's saying that basically because he profiles as such, he's a ball-playing centre back, or he's a ball playing this, he can play at left back as well. Maybe he can. Maybe Liam Scales can. That was Liam Scales as well, remember? So Liam Scales was left back, and how did that work out? So, we're not playing him there. So it's as simple as that. So, if he's coming in to do that job, he'll not be coming in as second choice, or at least he shouldn't be absolutely shouldn't be anywhere near it. You'd be better off with Liam Scales. And can I just finish off by saying, Paul John, I think that the two things that Patrick mentioned. So I thought Quinny did a good job the other day of explaining why CCV won't be going anywhere. And simply down to his age and his profile, and he's not going to be going to. He won't be going to the Premier League if he goes. So I don't think so anyway, and I think that's probably the case. And I think, I'll not repeat everything Quinny said, but I think he did a very good job of explaining why it's very unlikely that CCV goes. But for me, what about, is Trusty not surely out the door? You bring a guy in for 5 or 6 million and he can't get in front of Scales. Surely he's got to go. Either that or he's going to be the permanent third choice. And we're happy enough to have a guy that we paid £6 million for, sitting as third choice.
I think it's a big discussion, John. It's a big discussion on Trusty.
Maybe we are happy enough with that. It doesn't sound like our board. It doesn't sound like our board to have a £6 million player as your third choice player. But maybe we are. And it's that kind of thing you would like to see as you're building. But you would like to see a guy who's really pushing, to get in place. And the fact, as Patrick said, the fact that the manager didn't trust him at the end, that was really poor. And you can't get in front of Scales. And we know Scales has done a great job, and fair play to him. But if you're bought in for 6 million, and this team at centre half, a £6 million centre half, is either the first choice centre half or they should be out the door.
John, all the chat last season, right up to now, has been about overspend when it comes to Arnie Engels, when it comes to Adam Ida. And I look at both of those players and their output, and I know they've not had perfect seasons. I absolutely get it. Adam Ida, 20-goal season. Arnie Engels, I could keep banging the drum about his goals and his assists. He played 50 games for us, broke into the Belgian national team, played his first Champions League campaign. I think the one guy we absolutely did overspend on is Austin Trusty, because he's a £6 million signing who doesn't get a game. He's not your first pick. And the big discussion yesterday we had, Patrick, was all around where he sits now in the pecking order, because if he's still below Liam Scales, on merit, by the way, as John says, Scales is the best option right now. On merit, Austin Trusty doesn't start the game. He doesn't start the first game of competitive football for Celtic. So did we overspend on him? Or is it a case of, we're going to put him into that bracket of needs a pre-season and all this kind of stuff, because we tend to have a leniency to some of these guys who haven't quite hit the ground running. We've written players off in the past who have come good. Of course we have. Where's Trusty with you? Because I share some of these concerns that John's raised today.
I'm hesitant to sort of put him out the door, because we have paid that money, and for there to be such a quick turnaround, I think teams will. There's next to no chance of us getting that money back. If we sign him for 6, barely play him, and then decide to punt him the following summer, we're going to be accepting the highest bidder, and you could go for only 1 or 2 million. I just think because the money we've paid, because he's only been here for 12 months, I think he's got to stay. I can't see us selling him at all, because I can't see any money coming in for him, and I can't see him. I can't see us trying to force him out the door when we've already got Lagerbielka and Nawrocki that we're trying to get rid of. Because they're definitely not going to play. They're below Trusty in the pecking order. But I think you're right. I don't think he plays in the first league game of the season. I know the fixtures come out. I think it's this Friday morning.
Yeah.
So that'll be a sort of interesting. That's the hard part of the summer done. I think when you get past the sort of 3-4 weeks when there's no football and you've not even get the fixtures yet, you can at least look forward to the fixtures and the friendlies and the Champions League draw and all that. But no, I don't think Trusty starts in that first game of the season. At the minute, it probably is Scales and Carter-Vickers. I hope. I didn't catch what Quinny said, but I hope his analysis is correct, because as much as he's been here for 4 years and we're normally incredibly lucky to have a top quality player here for 4 years, but I think Carter-Vickers would be such a big miss, possibly more than Maeda. I think the only one that has a bigger influence is probably McGregor. He's such a reassuring presence in that back line. I mean, you need to go back to, pre-Carter-Vickers, you're talking about Ange's, 3 losses in first 6 games when he first came in, and before that you're into the COVID season, where I think Ayer and Welsh were your starting centre-halves, and then before that you had Chris Julian getting bullied by sort of Livingston centre-forwards. So he's been such a reassuring presence, and I think a lot of people forget that, so I hope he does stay. But we obviously need a partner for him in there. And I think, in my opinion, if we're going to keep that sort of 25, 26 squad number that Rodgers wants, I think Trusty and Scales are going to be the backups. And I'd be keen to see Dane Murray stay, get some minutes, and then maybe next summer, either Scales or Trusty moves on and Dane Murray can hopefully try and come into the team, get some more minutes, and hopefully he'll end up being a first team centre half for Celtic, because he's certainly got the height. And if anything, that's one thing we've missed the last sort of 4 or 5 years. We've had good ball playing centre halves, we've had good defenders, good headers of the ball, but we've not really had tall centre halves. He obviously adds to the Scottish quota as well, so I'd like to see him hang around. And centre half, because there's 2 of them, it's one of those positions where you can have 4 or 5 guys in the same position, because you do need the backup and you do need 2 guys in every game. So I think that's what has to happen. I'd like to think we'll get money for Lagerbielke because he's been on loan. Nawrocki, it looks as if a loan. I can't pronounce the club's name. I can't remember the club's name in Poland. I'll not butcher it. But it looks as if that's where he's heading this season, and hopefully we can get money for him next summer. But it is a conundrum. And then on top of all this, I mean, we've not even discussed it yet. You've got the manager's contract situation, as well as the qualifier. We've not had a qualifier for 3 years, and we were famously hesitant to spend money when we hadn't quite qualified yet. And we know how big that pot of gold is in the Champions League. So it should be interesting to see just how quickly we get the business done, because there might be a hesitancy from the club if Rodgers isn't signing a deal. But then there might be a hesitancy from Rodgers to sign a deal if he's not been backed. So there's all sorts of different angles you can look at this. But
loads of moving parts. Loads of
to the
moving
annoyance
parts.
of Henrik McLarsson in the comments, lots of moving parts.
It's Pogan section, something along those lines. A couple of wee points from that as well, though, Patrick. I think Brendan likes Dane Murray. He cut his loan period short, didn't he, and brought him back. He stated that in that game where Nawrocki gets thrown back into the first team against Rangers, Murray was going to play in that game, but then he had his injury to his knee. Otherwise, he'd have played in that game against Rangers as well. And of course, that being the case, he probably would have played the following week against Hearts, because Nawrocki got 2 games back to back. So I think he does fancy him. He does like him. Your point on CCV is a brilliant one. Yes, he came in and steadied the ship big time. But here's another wee point. Since Carter-Vickers has come in, John, who's been scouting our centre halves? Because the much maligned and often forgotten about Yuki Kobayashi was the next centre half that came in to Celtic, and I think you're going to be hard pushed to find anyone who wouldn't regard his time at Celtic as being a bit of a flop. Then you look at 2 summers ago, where we bring in a number of different centre halves. First one being Nat Phillips. He comes in. There was a loan fee of around £2 million for Nat Phillips coming to the football club. Of course, we also signed Mike Nawrocki for £4.3 million, Gustav Lagerbielke for £3 million, and we've since signed Austin Trusty for £6 million. So you're looking at the gutsy £15 million, John, on centre halves, and we're still playing Liam Scales. Who's scouting our centre halves?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that the problem is it's the manager. I said this when he came in, that that first window, that it didn't appear that he had to run his eye over the players and was trusting the team. Would have been Lowell at that time to bring these guys on board. And again, with Nawrocki and Lagerbielke, and we have information to say that. I mean, he had one look at Lagerbielke and binned him. Just said he's too slow. That was it. Yeah. And we just paid for him. We'd only just got him in the door. But he was in the door, but the manager was there to say no to that prior to getting him in the door. He could have, he had the time to look over him, look at his stats, because he was very obviously slow, look at his stats and say, no, why are we bringing him in? And he didn't. And then he got him in, looked at him, said, oh, you've got to be joking. Right, away you go. And that was that. And then he's obviously come to the same conclusion over time about Narovski. He just doesn't like the way he plays the game. So, that's him done. But, and this is what I'm saying about Tisdale. The reason it feels like a rebuild is because, and it's felt like a rebuild for the last couple of years, and we've been sort of placated with, there's a couple of big signings in Engels and Ida, and that's all grand. But again, as it turns out, then were they the right signings? So, but the who they were coming from was basically the issue. I mean, Ida, as we know, was famously, managers contact at the last minute. But this is what I'm saying. We need to see the workings of Tisdale, and that's maybe why, more than previous seasons, I'm prepared to just hang fire on the likes of Inamura and Osmond, because you're hoping that that's part of a bigger plan, but will become obvious as the summer unfolds, and that we are going to get some very serious first team players in. But, as we're often told, it can be difficult to do that early on because they're looking at their options. These guys, would have had, fairly limited options. So we obviously would look quite attractive to them, whereas sometimes we're not the first choice of other guys who are playing at a higher level. So, again, we want to see, how this unfolds. It's too early to say, but what I liked, and I posted about it and tweeted about it, I liked how many names that we were seriously connected to. It seemed to be all those wingers that Patrick wanted. We were seriously connected to about 20 of them. It looked like we've gone round every winger in Europe and tapped them up. So, if we are doing that, if we are that proactive, if we are actually, and obviously that's an exaggeration, but if we are that proactive, that's something that you have to applaud. And, if that's what Tisdale's doing, if that's the energy he's bringing, and we're making obvious contacts with people, I'm delighted with that, because, it's a numbers game. You might not always get your first choice, but, you need to have choice number 2, not choice number 3 ready to go. You need to be prepared for, you need to have A, B, and C plans of action in case you lose one of your better players, and they decide to go at the last minute. So, I believe a great man once said that there were lots of moving parts, and so we obviously have to bear that in mind. But we see what happens. It's good to see that we're actually looking. The worst thing that could have happened really in this transfer window is that we get no information until the last minute, and then we're connected with what you might always term the usual suspects. The guys you're always connected to, or guys you're never going to get, or guys that used to work with Brendan, and just that, that sort of, that would indicate nothing much has changed. At least with this, the way it's happening at the moment, or seems to be happening at the moment, it does seem as if, there are plans in place, and those plans are going to take a while to unfold. But as I said right at the start, Tisdale's got a very, very big job in his hands here, as does the manager. So there's a lot to be done. And as to the point you made previously, in terms of, will the board, have the vision to recruit in terms of, whether we're getting into the Champions League or not, to wait at this stage with our money in the bank. If you are waiting until we've qualified for the Champions League before trying to build a Champions League worthy team, you have already failed.
Yeah.
And you've already failed. And that would be the same attitude that applies to the stadium. Now, I think you made the point the other day, Paul, John, when I was watching, Fergus McCann committed to building a stadium when there was 2 men and a dog watching. Do you know what I mean? We had really poor crowds at that point, obviously, because Rangers had been cheating for a decade. So, you know, the crowds weren't great, and he committed to building the stadium. It wasn't a full decade at that point, obviously, but he committed to building a full stadium. And there was no indication that the crowds would be there at that point. You know, that he believed he could turn it round. And we need someone with that sort of vision. Not reckless. It doesn't need to be reckless. These guys are smart enough that they know ways that we can finance this. You know, they know sponsorships we could get, or, you know, whatever it is as well, additional finance that might come on the back of it. You know, and if you've got, especially the corporate boxes, you're inviting people into those boxes who have serious wedge, you know, and who might be willing to, you know, invest in the club, you know, further invest in the club. So, yeah, it just needs vision and courage. And it's easy to say that, but it's a lot of money and it's a lot of commitment. You know, a long-term infrastructure project, as long as it's properly financed, you're rarely going to go wrong with that. And it's been the backbone of all the success we've had with the extra 10,000 seats, you know, over Rangers. It has been the backbone of everything that we've achieved. That bit of vision, that bit of courage. So we cannot back down from that. We cannot just, you know, put our heads in the sand and say, this will do. You know, especially when the club, as Patrick pointed out earlier, has hundreds of money. You know, so, but you know, it's basically, who is it that's going to show that? Because Dermot Desmond, you know, is he the man for the vision and the courage, or is he just waiting for his executive team and his board to demonstrate that? Is he waiting for them to bring him a project and say, look, we can do this? Because if he's not presented with it, will it ever happen? You know,
John, you make some great points, because the Fergus thing, I think, is oft forgotten. I think we all know the impact that he made, and he absolutely built, you know, the foundations to this is the legacy of Fergus McCann, the success that we're enjoying. But when he built a 60,000 seater stadium, I mean, I've got, as I keep saying right in front of me here, I think the first 100 editions of Not the View fanzine, and in the very early days, they were talking about a rebuild of a 40 to 50,000. And by the way, way ahead of the curve, they're Not the Few guys. But they were saying, you know, we don't need a 60,000 stadium because we will fill it against Rangers. You know, that's when we'll fill it. We weren't getting big European nights at Celtic Park, John, because we were rotten in Europe. You know, we might have got to the second round of the UEFA Cup. That's the kind of extent of our European prowess at that point. So we weren't going to be filling it out, but he had that foresight. And now the other thing as well, a bigger risk than that, because we all knew the potentially Celtic Football Club in the fan base was actually on paper. It told you, John, we only sold 8 to 12,000 season tickets. That's what we sold. Yet he builds a 60,000 seater stadium based on trying to sell it to season ticket holders. And for the first time, we started promoting season tickets, and we now have 54,000 of them. So that vision was unbelievable. And that was a huge leap. And this is what I was saying earlier, John. The next bit's just it's a much smaller step to get to the 70,000 capacity stadium. And I just don't understand it as a fan. And I hope somebody out there can maybe explain it to me, because we've got 2 training facilities at Lennoxtown and Barrowfield. It looks as though we're putting all this investment into Barrowfield. What was it, 20 million quid, I think? 20 million pound into Barrowfield. And I get it, yeah, but we've got this facility at Lennoxtown. I mean, rather than just expand that, we've ploughed 20 million pounds into the Barrowfield. And you look at the stadium and you think to yourself, John, like you say, there's ways that could be financed. Absolutely, there's ways that could be financed. I mean, we could be paying it off with our profits every single year. Quite quickly, we could pay off a 100 million pound rebuild of the main stand. So I don't understand it. I wish someone would enlighten me. There's maybe a really obvious reason as to why we don't do it. People have been saying to me, we'll never fill it. Right, I get that. There's sold out games, Patrick, that you know that a lot of the season ticket holders are not showing up for. But as a club and a company, as long as the ticket's sold, you know, it's a sold out game to them. So it's worthwhile. We need to be in a position when big changes happen in football all the time. I mean, I was just looking at, I've not really been paying much attention to this World Club Cup competition, but they're always looking to expand and get the big pool and the big reach teams into competitions. Ours will obviously be some form of European league, which the Champions League's looking more and more like every season. We need to be prepared for that. We need to have the 5-star stadium. We need to have the parking underneath the changing rooms and all this kind of stuff. So why wait? And by the way, John, it's probably been a while since I looked at this, but I've just had a look at the total spend of that first transfer window. Now, bear in mind, this is the summer transfer window, not taking into account what we went and spent later on in the season. But when Brendan Rodgers came to the football club, we spent £18.73 million, right? And then the loan fee on Nat Phillips. So we spent £20 million gross. I'm talking gross here, right? £20 million on the following. Tomoki Iwata, we can say he's a flop because we got rid of him. We got our money back. Odin Holm, Marco Tilio, Yang, Kwon, Nawrocki, Lagerbielke, Palmer, and Phillips. 20 million quid. So if that's ground zero and that's where we were in recruitment, John, you're absolutely right. This is a huge window for Paul Tisdale because that was shambolic. And for me, I think if you look at the money we bring back for all those players, what you're looking at, Patrick, maybe 50% if you're lucky. If you're lucky to bring back for all those guys going out the door.
Can I just point out? Sorry, Patrick. Just point out one thing. That list, if you read that again, even at the time they were signed, how many of them were supposed to be starters? How many of them weren't projects? You know, how many of them were basically a gamble? And to only spending £20 million, I'm quite sure we made plenty in that. How much did we? What was the net figure? We actually made a profit about 15 million or something.
That was the summer we sold Jota for 25.
Yeah, I mean, just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And to take that money, not increase upon it, spend less than that, and just a bunch of projects. Is it any wonder we're now looking at it going, it's a massive job? Sorry, Patrick.
No worries. I know you make a good point. I think we'll be lucky to get 50% back. You said we broke even with Iwata. We might break even with Holm. I think he was relatively cheap amongst that list. Obviously, than Nat Phillips money that's already gone. Nawrocki and Lagerbielke, I think. Could you maybe get the same money for Lagerbielke? Possibly, if he's playing well in Holland. I think we're going to have to eat a loss with Nawrocki. There's no way a Polish team's going to pay us £4.5 million. Palmer, how much did we sign him for? 2, 3, 4 million. I think we're very lucky to get that money back. So I think you're right. I think
Palmer,
50%.
£3.5 million for Palmer. The same price that we paid in fact, more than what we paid for Kuhn.
He had a brilliant 3 months, though. I mean, to be fair to him, what a 3 months he had.
Yeah, the nice show reel. Yeah, his Instagram reels were pretty good. Yeah.
I mean, I remember that game at Tynecastle, the home game against Atletico Madrid. I mean, he was brilliant, but not get the work ethic, not get the attitude, and slow as well. Always slow. I thought he was a bit like Haksabanovic in that mould, but I would be lucky to. From the 18 million that we retained the signings of, we've obviously made the money back in Iwata. So call it 16 million. You'd be lucky to get 8 or 9, I think, for the players who are still in the books. You never know. I mean, Odin Holmes in America, you might get some daft MLS chairman want to pay 6 million for him. You might get lucky there. I mean, that's a shocking window. And as John said, I think we get 5 million for Starfelt in that window as well. So you're bringing in 30. I'm sure we sold some bit part players as well at some stage. So we brought in probably over 30 and we spent 18. And that was the. Brendan has to take a hit for it as well. I mean, he came in saying the new recruitment structure was part of the reason he came back. He's quite happy to sign off on players without really sort of doing a deep dive on them. So he's got to share some of the blame, of course, but. That's not a proper window for a Champions League club, and that's what today's all about. Need to make Champions League decisions, and then just going back to the stadium, having the foresight. I mean, parts of that main stand are 100 years old. The bulk of it, I think, was completed in 1971.
Yeah.
Even the stadium that Fergus built, I mean, parts of that are 30 years old now. You need to fix this when the sun is shining. So you've got a 55-year-old stand there. That's not going to last forever. That's going to need serious work at some stage. And we've got, 60, 70 million in the bank, I'd imagine. We might sell a few players this summer. There's obviously a logistical issue. If you want to be a 5-star sort of stadium and you want to hold European finals, you need that bus underneath the stadium, and there's all sorts of utilities under the ground. There's a question about design. If you're going to totally knock it down, rebuild it, increase the capacity, increase the hospitality, you need to actually house these people. For I think the Hearts stand took 9 to 10 months. So I mean, do we play at Murrayfield? Do we not have away fans? Do we pay people to sit at home for a year essentially, miss a full season? There's all sorts of logistical questions, but this is something that will definitely have to happen at some stage.
Yeah,
probably in the next 30 years. Are we ever going to be in a more sort of comfortable, cash-rich position in the next 30 years? The board clearly think so. They either think that, or they think, not a problem, let someone else deal with it, which would be a damning attitude to take, to be perfectly honest. But this is something that's going to happen at the club. And you like to see improvements either to the infrastructure or to the squad. And it is a bit of a shame that when we're riding high and we've had such a good season, there is very little faith that we're capable of achieving either of those, never mind both. But, I'm happy to be proved wrong. The last 4 years, as I said at the top of the show, have been brilliant. We've improved financially, we've improved in Europe, we've continued to dominate domestically. Maybe those surprises. I like to think we'll get a few quality players in this summer, because it really is necessary. In terms of the main stand, I've got very little hope for the sort of short to medium term. I don't think we're going to see that properly redeveloped for a few years yet.
That's my concern, John. You were talking about who actually leads this, who drives it. I don't think there's a culture at Celtic that kind of welcomes that kind of train of thought, because obviously the last time we saw a chief executive going in who wasn't of the mould, if you like, or the culture already there, he lasted something like 70 days and he was out in his ear. So I'm not saying he tried to make these changes, but I think we're very much stuck in our ways in that respect, John. So I'm not confident that it will happen under the current regime.
Yeah. Well, the problem is, when you're lacking the courage and vision that we're talking about, is if you're dominated by fear and dominated by maintaining the status quo, it becomes ever decreasing circles. So you need rainy day money, aye, and then when it starts raining, if something goes wrong, it's more likely in this case to go wrong because you're not spending that money, not because you are spending that money. It's more likely to go wrong because you're not, because it's a results-based business and we need to spend to get those results. As long as we're in the Champions League, financially we'll be okay. If we're not going to spend that money to get in the Champions League, then it becomes ever decreasing circles. Then you're in the Europa League, then you're losing money. And then you don't want to spend all the rainy day money because you don't know what's going to happen the following year. And then you're not good enough squad to get, to get into the Champions League. And it just becomes an ever decreasing circle, the Lowell circles. So basically, if we don't show that courage at board level, and lots of people have said before that, again, is Michael Nicholson the best man for the job? It is sort of suspicious that you do a global search for a CEO and it turns out he was sitting next door, but only after the guy that you brought in gets sacked. So Michael is obviously a very, very talented lawyer and a very, very smart guy. Are those the characteristics that you want of a CEO, or is it someone with perhaps more of an entrepreneurial spirit, or perhaps who's have built their own businesses in the past? Someone with that kind of experience, not a risk taker, but someone who has a demonstrable record of that kind of vision that you need in order to build a business. Coming in and running someone else's business successfully, it's very, very, very different from having the chops to build a business, basically. So, is someone like that more the kind of person that we need? But regardless, as you say, someone like that's never going to get a job at Celtic, and if they did, they'll be out the door shortly thereafter. Dom Mackay, I think, threatened to change the tea and the coffee in the board meetings, and that was enough to get him sacked. He was change brands.
The smoking shelter. He suggested that was moved, John. That was the end of it. Go on. Don't move the smoking shelter, Dominic. Right. By the way, just to let you know that we have some merchandise that was inspired by Panathinaikos, if you fancy it. There you go. Go and check it out in the shop. Absolutely. Panathinaikos were taken to the European Cup final by Ferenc Puskas, who later managed Ange Postecoglou. So we seen Puskas kicking about in this tracksuit top, and we thought, aye, we like that. So it's on the channel. It's on the website if you want to go and get one. But they are
Who was
running
that?
pretty low.
Paul John, you shared a TikTok video. Some girl, Rennie Rapp or something like Rapp. What was that?
Rennie Rapp. And by the way, because of her name, I wrongly said that she was a rapper. She's a singer, pop singer and actress. Who bouncing about with the Celtic tracksuit top on.
Aye,
Brilliant.
what was that about?
I'm not sure how she got it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how she got it.
It's a bit weird. Weird.
Brilliant. And in the same week, Brooke Combe presents Lionel Richie with the hoops as well. Love to see it. Spreading the word. Absolutely tremendous. But yeah, some really good comments. I want to run through them before we wrap up, because it has been a very quick hour. I've got to say thank you to Tony Ratton for supporting the channel. It's always appreciated, guys. Jim Conlon comes in to say the Celtic Park toilets are shocking. D. McGee, I can't see us spending money until we're in the Champions League proper. That's the concern. We've also got Colin Bean. The main stand is in desperate need of a revamp. The facilities for season ticket holders are pretty poor, even in comparison with the cheap seats in other parts of the stadium. A very good view. The view is very, very good in the main stand. I quite like that camber, but you're absolutely right. It definitely needs an upgrade. They don't care where the plebs sit, just the money men. Which new, says Snick. I'll tell you something, though. Having managed to get into these boxes from time to time on invite, the people that are in the boxes are just Celtic fans that have set up a business that's become successful, John. They're all working class people, aren't they?
Yeah,
so like the proper prawn sandwich brigade, you know, and they're all Celtic daft, and they want to pump a wee bit of their money into Celtic. So fair play to them, says I.
Just for research, even, you know, in the cost of those tickets. And, you know, I've got friends in there, and you've got the likes of, you know, I was talking to Bobby Murdoch the other day, and, you know, he's got multiple tickets in there. That is a serious wedge. Mm-hmm. You know, you need to be successful to be in there, and, you know, it's, but again, just normal guys, you know, construction, painters, decorators, the whole thing, and they're spending, proportionate to their income, they're spending an awful lot of money to see Celtic, an awful lot of money. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, you know, it's not even the hospitality box guys, just hospitality in general. You know, you're spending a serious dough. When you consider, if you're spending, you know, up to 10 grand on those tickets, right, there's a good chance you might be paying 40% tax. So how much have you had to earn in order to pay that 10 grand net? You know what I mean? So it's no joke. People are very, very dedicated to the club and are willing to put their hand in their pockets, and we've seen that year after year. A lot of people have pointed out multiple times: is it the board's success, or is it the success of the fans? Because we have some of the most spendthrift fans in Europe. I would love to know what our fans spend per head in comparison to other clubs, because I think it's a huge amount. But if you take into account the tickets and the merch and the away games and all of that, I think it's a vast amount in comparison to nearly every other club in Europe.
That's a brilliant shout, John. That's not something that people seem to compile, but I'd love to see that. I would love to see that. The dedication's unbelievable from the supporter, especially once you say you take into the European away days, all that kind of stuff, and it adds up. Unbelievable commitment. Dougie Lynch, you're in. It would be stronger if we didn't always have a net spend of zero. Yes, we would.
Yes.
And there needs to also come a point where we show a bit of a risk. It's a calculated risk to say that we want to be a Champions League club. We want to act like one. Therefore, we need to behave like one in the transfer window. The transfer window we used, we know that was a bit of an outlier, but that was a really, really poor transfer window. We need to do something completely different this time round. And I'm going to say it, I'd much rather have Engels and Ida than that £20 million worth of signings that I read out earlier on in the show. I'd much rather have Ida and Engels. So there you go. There's another point of discussion. It's been a very quick hour. John and I were going to reconvene this over a drink that Paddy's going to buy us on Friday night. John, he already said that in the comments, so we're going to hold on to that. Really looking forward to seeing all the Ardoyne boys over there. And John, yourself as well. It'll be good to catch up with you, mate. If you want to come in and see us in Glasgow a week on Friday, then we're going to be with Brian McClare and Peter Grant. I think we're stuck on about 30 tickets to go, but they will go over the next 10 days or so. So get involved in that one. Come and see the lads as well. There's quite a few Acsom faces going to be at that gig. As always, it's a pleasure. We never even had a rant for you today, John. You're saving it up for Friday. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Thank God to the Dunfermline Wi-Fi for holding up. And thank you to Patrick and John for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Hail, hail.